Good morning, everybody. We are apparently all back in town. Great pleasure, of course, to have here again with us Dr. Simcha Epstein. I want, first of all, to announce the next lectures. We have, for those who are not very old timers of this program, we have on the 2nd of November, we show again the film about the role of the Jews in Sarajevo during the Civil War. This is one of the great stories of post-war Judaism, where the Jewish community, in fact, played a neutral role between the Muslims, the Croats, and the Serbs, with the help of the joint, furnished, in fact, provided medicaments to all streams of that war-torn town, helped get people out, not only a large part of the members of the Jewish community, and but also others, with risk for the life of the leadership. Ivan Seresnes, who was the head of the community at that time, will introduce the movie, which was made by the official Italian state television. Certainly those of you who have seen it will testify that it was very beautiful, that it is a very beautiful movie, and the story hasn't been given much attention. Then on the 16th we will have Anne Hertzberg, who is the legal advisor of NGO Monitor on the legal wars against Israel, what we nowadays commonly call lawfare. So that's what's coming. Well, delegitimization of Israel is going extremely fast. In fact, in the perhaps 2 years ago, we were still talking about advocacy for Israel. You explain Israel's position today. Advocacy has been totally superseded, has become totally secondary to the battle against delegitimization. And the center in its various parts has played a major role in that, first of all through this program, which is now running for 9 years, where we have explained how anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism are really two sides of the same coin, and in a postmodern society how you have many originators and how it all functions. And on the other hand, we have seen in specific cases, such as the Goldstone report, where the JCPA president, Dr. Dori Gold, played a leading role in what was no longer advocacy, but has become the battle against delegitimization. And we see also in the foreseeable future that delegitimization will be far more important than advocacy. Well, Dr. Epstein is not an unknown. Dr. Epstein is not an unknown person for you. He has spoken here in the past. Last year, you may remember about philo-Semitism. He was, in fact, the first, and by that also the only one, I must say, the only one who started to analyze the waves of anti-Semitism after the Holocaust. There have been 3 waves before what today is more a tornado, if you want to call it like that. There have been 3 waves in the 20th century. He has analyzed those in great detail, and that gives him also the opportunity to analyze why this is different from what there was in the past, and why this is no longer probably a wave, but a structural phenomenon. Dr. Epstein teaches at the Hebrew University. He's published a number of books on anti-Semitism, racism, and Jewish history. He wrote one of the very interesting books he wrote, and which was also recognized by a prize of the French Academy, was his book on how the defenders of Dreyfus, who survived till the Second World War, in fact all became collaborators of the Nazis.
Majority.
Huh?
Majority.
Well, almost. As far as I remember from the book, it were almost all.
Okay.
to a certain extent, but some more, some less, and that's of course a very interesting thing. And I must say, it required infinite research to dig through the stories of all these not very savory individuals. So, Dr. Epstein, please.
Thank you, Manfred. Good morning, shalom. In order to follow the previous waves of anti-Semitism, we should use one of the indicators, and the best indicator for that is the indicator of anti-Jewish violence. There are different indicators. This is the best one in order to be able to follow the waves. The information is collected in every country. In general, in most of the countries you have a Jewish structure, and you have also a state structure which collects the material. We have also a word structure, meaning an Israeli structure, trying to have an overview, a word overview of the information. In the United States, to give only one example, the IDL collects and the FBI collects, for instance. So we have information. There is no link between those different systems, but as we will see, and I say that very quickly in order to keep time for the fourth wave, the most important wave. In general, the waves are common to the totality of the Western world. When the number of anti-Jewish attacks is on the rise in the United States, it's also on the rise in Europe. When it goes down, and it goes down everywhere, more or less. Let me present first, if you please, the former waves which characterized the Western world. I'm going to use a very primitive way of expressing, which is bold and I know there are much more modern ways of expressing, but after the Shoah, the first outburst, the first well-known outburst of anti-Jewish violence was at the end of the 50s, the beginning of the 60s, what was called the epidemic of the swastika. For those of you who remember that outrageous wave of anti-Jewish violence, which covered the totality of the Western world, including the United States, including Latin America, and of course Europe. It started at the end of '59, and it lasted about 3 or 4 months. Until 1960, you had a huge number of attacks against Jewish premises, against synagogues, of course, cemetery desecration, over the totality of the Western world. Of course, you have a rhetoric of protest, how could it be? And you have also attempts to understand what happened. The first theory which was presented said that if it happens in Stockholm and in the United States, in Paris and in Berlin, not in Berlin, in Bonn, in the same period, it means that there is a planification, an underground planification, and the theory was the neo-Nazi conspiracy. This theory lasted about 2 weeks, till the police of the different countries started to catch the responsibles and to discover that the responsibles were all young men, in a few cases young women, but in general young men, young boys, attacking by their own will in a sort of spontaneous organization, a non-crystallized wave of violence attacking the Jews. And that gave birth to another theory, which was no more justified than the first one, which was the theory of the copycat theory. Some young people have heard that in Bonn, for instance, a synagogue was desecrated, and so they decided, let's do it in Paris, or let's do it in London, or let's do it in New York. It appears afterwards that it was no more justified because it appeared also in places where the information never was presented to the public. So we are dealing here with a phenomenon which is a very interesting phenomenon, a sociological phenomenon, clearly anti-Jewish, of course, anti-Jewish hatred, based, of course, on anti-Jewish hatred, and expressing something which was not so clear, and which was not so easy to analyze. Yes, please?
Sorry to interrupt, but was this against property or also against persons?
You had attacks against property, like synagogues or cemeteries, and you had also attacks against persons in the streets. You have all the statistical data were printed in those days, and as I said, we have no time to develop. You had all the rhetorics which you may imagine, never again, and we will not accept, and so on. Including the decision by Ben Gurion to include the Western world in the scope of, let us say, of vigilance by the State of Israel. For those who know what I'm talking about, you will understand. Saying that we are not dealing only with the Jews of Arab countries or communist countries, we are also responsible for the safety of the Jews of the Western world. That was a decision 61. Then it went down. We had here and there in 65 some more agitation in France, in Germany, in other countries, in the United States also. And then we enter a period which is a very interesting period, from 67 to 73. When violence, that kind of violence, almost completely disappeared. A new kind of violence came, of course, which was terror violence and terrorist violence. But it was an exogenous violence, coming from abroad, coming from the Middle East. It was not linked in France by the French, in Germany by the German. And so certain of you certainly remember, those were the days between 67 to 73 when we spoke of a new anti-Semitism. The old anti-Semitism has disappeared. There are no more attacks against synagogues. Attacks, I mean anti-Semitic attacks. I'm not speaking of terror attacks, something completely different. No more anti-Semitic attacks against cemeteries, for instance, but there is anti-Zionist campaign, and there are a lot of publications about the neo-anti-Semitism or the new kind of anti-Semitism, if you remember. Okay, I have no time to deal with that point, but the concept of neo-anti-Semitism started far before. Started in the beginning of the 50s. I found some expressions in the 30s about the new anti-Semitism. So we are living already a long period of time with that new anti-Semitism. And then it came again, and started again after 73, 74. And we have here the beginning of the second wave, which was certainly stronger than the first one, and higher than the first one. Till 82, according to the countries. In certain countries, the culminating point was in 80, certain other countries, 82, more or less. This wave was a very important wave because, first, the rhetorics, the Jewish rhetorics, generated by the wave, different kind of attitudes, the fighting attitude, saying we will not permit and we will mobilize, a classical Jewish reaction in phases of raising anti-Semitism. You have also other reactions saying that it is not really anti-Semitism, it is something else. For instance, there was also a wave of racism in Western Europe attacking the immigrant population, so they said it's part of a general wave of racism, it's not specifically anti-Semitic. There were also persons who said that the Arabs and the Palestinians are responsible for that, and it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism in the country. There are also some lunatic explanations. I just want to remind one of those lunatic explanations because it was accepted by certain person, saying that the Soviet Union is responsible for that. The Soviet Union is sending agents and in order to provoke anti-Semitism in the Western world. Today we smile. In those days, some very serious person advocated that it was certainly a Soviet plot against the Western world and against the Jews in the Western plot. Do remember, it lasted from, as I said, the culminating points according to the countries were 1980, 1982. The war in Lebanon, the first war in Lebanon, added a quantity of events, but it is clear if you look at the statistics, at the data of the days, it added something else which was very easy to identify on the graphs. Something which was due to those months of June, June, July, August, September 82. So it added, spoke a lot of the Jews in the TV, and so it added some more incidents. But the war in Lebanon never generated the war, the wave. The wave was generated by something else, which was not clear, which till today is not clear. I'll come to the question of the generating force of those waves. And then everywhere it started to go down. And the decrease is very clear since 83. You look at the ADL, you look at the publications of the Verfassungsschutz in Germany, you look at all the publications of the institution working on the question, including the Israeli institution, which collect the data from everywhere. It goes down. And just remember, when it goes down, there is also a special rhetorics for the days when it goes down. That's the end of anti-Semitism. There will be no more anti-Semitism. Those who were quite moderate in reacting to the wave said, we were right. You see, Hitler is not back again, and so we were right not to get panicked and to start to shout Gewalt, Gewalt. We were right. It goes down. It was very clear, and it went down in every country. Look at the statistics. It's very clear. The tendency is the trend of going down continued till 86, 87, and then in the beginning of 88 we have a new rise in incidents. So that was the first wave, first significant wave, of course. That was the second one. The third started, as I said, in 86, 87, 88, according to the countries. It culminated, according to the countries, it culminated in France in 1990, in Germany in 1992. Those who remember the violence against the Turks and the immigrants were also violence against the Jews. They were less spectacular because everyone looked at the violence against the immigrants, but in fact there were also a dramatic, a very sharp rise in violence against the Jews of Germany. In the United States, it lasted a little bit more till 94. And this was, in fact, the third wave, very clearly clearly expressed on all the graphs, all the statistical graphs which were published by the different organizations. I'd like to say a few words more about this third wave. In the second wave, the extreme right in Europe was zero. If you look at the results of the elections, European elections or state elections or local elections, till 83, 84, the extreme right is 1% or 2%. If you take the results in Germany or the results in France, they are almost inexistent. In the third wave, the European extreme right has already made its comeback in history. Remember, the comeback in history starts with Le Pen in France in 84, with Schönhuber and the Republikaner in Germany 83, 84, 85, Haider, of course, in Austria, and all the others. So the waves that we are dealing with now, the third wave, is a wave of violence, as I said, cemetery desecration, according to the classical pattern, but it's also a wave with a representation of the extreme right, a minority representation, of course, but a representation of the extreme right in European instances or European parliaments, varying from 5% of the vote in certain countries, 8% of the vote, 12% of the vote, 15% of the vote. That's more or less globally the result. Something which was not existing in the former waves, the wave 2 and wave 1. And then, after 94, there is a decline, a clear decline in every country. And the second part of the 90s is idyllic in terms of anti-Jewish violence in the countries. In certain countries you have a residual anti-Jewish physical activity. From time to time you have a cemetery desecration, for instance, but almost nothing. Almost nothing. In certain countries it approaches zero. And if you look at the rhetorics, and if you look at the publications of those days, and I kept some of them, and I'm going to publish them, that's the end of anti-Semitism. That's really the end of anti-Semitism. And I remember, for instance, in the Hebrew University, or even in groups and institutions which were supposed to work and to analyze anti-Semitism, the idea was that anti-Semitism is dead. It exists as a subject of analysis, as a subject of historical research. It is no more something worrying or something which should be dealt with in terms of what is happening today or what is going to happen in the future. Those were the days, remember that, it's very interesting, those were the days of the end of anti-Semitism. We have seen that, and it's very clear, it's a cyclical phenomenon. And we are not built, I'll come back to that in my conclusion, we are not, psychologically, we as a collective, we are not built to deal with an alternative system. We are not built to deal with something which goes up and then goes down, goes up and then goes down. And so every time it goes down, it's the end. We are not able to remember that it goes down and then it will go up. We are not, I'll come back to that because it's very important concerning our perception and the way we analyze the phenomenon of anti-Semitism. But please do remember, before the outburst of October 2000, the idea and the publications show that at the end, we are living the last years of a phenomenon which was a horrible phenomenon in the past, but thanks God, today there is no more anti-Semitism. That was the idea, including by those who were supposed to be more vigilant or more, let's say, more active in perceiving the phenomenon. And from that, the surprise, the terrible surprise, the horrible surprise of October 2000. And then we enter in October of 2000, you remember that, we enter in a new period with, on the first month, October, November, December, a huge quantity of attacks against Jewish targets, essentially synagogues, much more synagogues than cemeteries, I'll come back to that. And then we enter a period, which we are still in that period, with years where it goes up. For instance, 2002 was the most terrible year of all the periods. And then it goes down, and it will go down in 2003, 2004. And then it goes up again, and we are still now in a period where we have something not clear, with ups and downs, but we are still at a high level of violence compared to the former waves. Before we should analyze that fourth wave, which is a present-day wave, I'd like to say a few words about the phenomenon in the past. As we see, it's an alternative phenomenon, a cyclical phenomenon. The tendency is that every wave is higher than the former wave. Also, it's not easy to say that because we all know that in social science there is a problem which is called the optical illusion of growing, which is based on the fact that in fact you have cases where what has been empowered are the systems of collecting information. So you have more systems which collect more efficiently information. So you have the feeling, it's true for any kind of criminality or any kind of, you have more information, so you have the feeling that you have more attacks in the field. But in fact, you have the same number of attacks. In that case, I do believe, and others also do believe, that the race is a real one. I mean that the third wave was higher than the second wave, and certainly the second wave was higher than the first wave. There is no doubt about it. So we are in a general trend which is a trend up. The direction is up. Each wave is stronger and higher than the former one. It's not apocalyptic. None of these waves was apocalyptic, remember. None of these waves were still dealing with violence, which is still in the low range of compared to what we knew in the past, even not compared to the Shoah, of course. Compared to the Shoah, of course. I mean, everything is ridiculous compared to the Shoah, but even compared to the 1930s, for instance. What we knew in Europe in the 1930s, we are still in a very lower position. But what is clear is a trend which is a trend growing up. So please, let's give a look at that wave. And it was quite easy to understand that there was a fundamental difference between that wave and the former waves, and the fundamental difference, the first, the essential fundamental difference was in the ethnic origin of the perpetrators. In the former waves, in the totality of the cases, apart from here and there an exception, if a cemetery was desecrated in France, it was by young Frenchmen. If a synagogue was desecrated in Germany, it was by young Germans, and in England, in the United States, it was a local ethnic activity by the extreme right, not the organized extreme right. Remember, it's a sort of spontaneous phenomenon. It's not a planified phenomenon. It's always something sporadic, but something local. Here, for the first time, and this is very important, we see a majority of cases perpetrated by young Muslims of the second and essentially of the third generation in those countries. And this means a lot of changes. Remember, the general appreciation, because there are no formal statistics and it's very difficult, what I heard from here and from there, from the different countries, is something between 2/3 till 75%, more or less, perpetrated by Muslims, which maintains a part perpetrated by the according to the old pattern, meaning perpetrated by the Germans, perpetrated by the French, you understand, but 2/3, and according to certain 75% are perpetrated by the Muslims. Which brings to some technical problems, and of course, which brings also to much more fundamental problems. So, very easily and very quickly, the technical problems. For the police, it's very clear that, and the police has to identify, when the police wants to identify who are the perpetrators of an attack against the Jews, so they have understood the ways of acting, and for instance, have understood in every country that young Muslims never desecrate a Jewish cemetery. So if there is a desecration of a cemetery, it's automatically and more or less automatically the extreme right. Young Muslims attack synagogues. Young Muslims are very violent in attacking Jews in the street. They don't desecrate cemeteries. So that's a technical way of discriminating between the two kind of the two categories of violence. A much more important technical problem is a problem that in the majority of the country, or in the quasi-totality of the countries, the statistics do not provide the ethnic origin of the perpetrator. They provide the ethnic origin of the victim. They don't provide the ethnic origin of the perpetrator. And so if a Muslim is attacked, let's say in Belgium, by a young extreme rightist gang, it is written in the statistics that a Muslim was attacked and was a victim of a hate crime. If a group of young Muslims attack a Jew, it will be said that a group of young men attacked a Jew. There is only one country, and when I will tell you which is the country, you will understand why. There is only one country which is for which it's very important to mention the ethnic origin of the Muslims if the Jews are attacked. Of course, it's Germany. In Germany, it is very clear that when a Muslim attacks a Jew, it appears in the statistics. It's highlighted in the statistics for reasons which are very clear, which I don't have to comment on. it will take time for the system to introduce a discriminating system permitting to know who are the perpetrators in terms of ethnic origin. Sometimes it will be made indirectly, by mentioning the name, for instance, if there is a trial, and so you mention the name, and through the name you understand that the name is the name of Arab or Muslim tonality, and there are other tricks which will be used, but basically the main system still today, as far as I understood, I may be wrong, but as far as I understood, the main European systems have not yet introduced the ethnic category concerning the perpetrators. And if they do that very gently in order to remain politically correct, of course, and because it's difficult to admit that a Muslim may be a perpetrator. It is clear that a Muslim may be a victim of the extreme right. It is not clear that he may be a perpetrator, and it's not politically correct to mention that, so it's not politically correct to introduce that as a classifying system in your data. There are, of course, basic problems, fundamental problems, which are linked to the fact that this wave, of course, is in its majority, as I said, not in its totality. This wave of violence is a Muslim-generated, young Muslim-generated wave of violence. And there are a lot of questions, and as far as I understand, a lot of people are trying to ask the questions, and even you have some journalists, and even some researchers which are trying to find solutions to the question, which is the basic question, which is it only linked to what is happening here? Is it only a direct consequence to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or is it something more serious and something which is not only linked to what is happening happening here? For some researchers, it is clear that it is only a consequence of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it is true that that wave, it was the first wave which was triggered by an event in Israel and in the Middle East. The other waves had another logic, had another way of behaving, and it's impossible to relate the other waves to an event here. We will see that because I'm sure that someone will ask. But the second wave started in '74. Isn't it a consequence of the Yom Kippur War and so on? We'll come back to that. This is the only wave which has been directly and immediately triggered by the events in the Middle East. So that's the most simple way of seeing it. There is a more complicated way of seeing, of looking at the situation, which has been implemented by journalists, as I said, and researchers, starting to ask those young Muslims what they think about, what's their attitude concerning the Jews. And here appears something which has nothing to do with the Middle East, or which has only a partial relation to the Middle East, but which is classical anti-Semitism linked to the fact that for the Muslim minorities, the Jews in Europe, which are supposed to be prosperous communities, the Jews are supposed to be prosperous communities, they are representing this Western society in which those Muslims would like to enter, but which they also despise and which they also hate. This ambiguous relation of the young Muslims to society, and if the Jew is representative of that society, if the Jew is a symbol of that society, of succeeding in that society, it is clear that, and it's easy to attack the Jews, of course, because they are a minority, and which is much more easier to attack than to attack the majority, which is still the majority, and so on. So there is a debate about that. There are very interesting publications about that, and I may just mention something which I would like to mention. I had a friend in France who sent me material in '88 or in '87, before the outburst of the wave, material concerning little expressions of violence and hatred of the Muslims concerning the Jews, which was based on a social basis, not on an Israel-Palestinian basis, but on a social basis. The Jews are rich, the Jews have conquered the French society, the Jews are the representatives of all we hate in French society, and so on. This is a debate, it's an important debate. We all understand the meaning of the debate concerning the future of the Jews and the future of the relations between the Jews and the Muslims in Europe. Some more remarks concerning the there was a period in the beginning of the wave, I don't know if you remember, where we said, and it was confirmed on the short term, it was confirmed by the statistics, that France, Belgium and Holland there are more attacks in France, Belgium and Holland than in Germany and than in England. And we said that because, of course, in France, the Muslims are also Arabs. So we said there is also the religious factor and the nationalistic factor. We said that till 2004, 2005, when suddenly it starts Great Britain start to change the figures, and Great Britain, where they are not Arabs, the number of attacks was spectacular. It was the same thing for Germany, and so that theory disappeared, which was accepted, let us say, in the beginning, in the first. Now we come to one of the fundamental meanings of what I said. The fact that the majority of the perpetrators are of Muslim origin, are Muslims, or young Muslims, will change, will have a dramatic influence on the way public opinion will react to the wave of violence. In the former waves, it was not difficult by the fact that the wave was clearly an extreme rightist wave. Not an extreme rightist in terms of organization. As I said, it was not crystallized in terms of organization. It was a sort of spontaneous, sporadic, but it was clearly extreme rightist. It was not difficult for the Jews to obtain the support of everyone, from the left, from the center, from the press, using a rhetoric which in certain times was certainly excessive and exaggerated and hyper-dramatic, like they are back and will Hitler be back and so on. You know that kind of excessive rhetorics, but it was not difficult for the Jews to obtain the support of the unions, to obtain the support of the leftist parties, to obtain the support of the press in Germany. This time it will be much more difficult, and it was quite dramatic to observe that from here, because when you look at the Jewish press and at the way the Jewish press in Germany, in England, in France, in Belgium, is dealing with the question, the feeling that the Jews are alone is much higher here than it was in the former waves. In the former waves, because of the anti-fascist rhetorics and anti-fascist mobilizations, the Jews had the feeling that they are not alone, that the others are ready. There were also huge demonstrations. Remember the demonstration in Germany in '92, in France in '90, for instance, speaking of that way. And also it was not difficult to obtain the support and the commendations by public opinion. In that wave, it's much more difficult because the people there is a self-restraint concerning condemnation, because you know that those persons are, the perpetrators are in the majority of Muslim origin. And a Muslim is supposed to be a victim, he's not supposed to be a perpetrator, which is the basic postulate of large sectors of European public opinion. I'll give just one illustration of that. During that wave, for instance, when the police brought to trial some perpetrators, the extreme left and the left in general asked for severe punishment. And when they were objected that they are young men, and they say they are young men, but they are fascist, and they have to be punished, and the punishment has to be spectacular in order for the people to learn about it, and so on. Here we have exactly the same thing, young men brought to trial. But the attitude is completely different. The attitude said they are young men. The same who said about a young Frenchman that he was not a young man, but he was a dangerous Nazi, saying to a young Muslim concerning he's a young man. And you see a complete reverse in the rhetorics, in the attitude, which will bring the Jews to feel isolated. I don't know if you have the same feeling, but I have, as an old observer of anti-Jewish waves, this time I felt, by looking at the Jewish press, that's my main source of information, I felt much more the feeling of isolation that during the former waves. That brings me to a conclusion. First, a technical conclusion. Here we have a model with ups and downs, and here we have not seen the down. So shall we remain faithful to the model, or shall we accept that there is a change in the model or a change in reality concerning the model? For the time being, I would have liked to announce the decrease. As I said, it's a decrease for a few years, so I mean, the celebration must be limited and moderate. But I should have liked to announce the decrease, but till now I'm not able to do that. So we are still here after 10 years. We are still here. Well, still. Secondly, if it goes down, this time we should be much more ready for accepting a system which is based on ups and downs. And we cannot announce at every Yom HaShoah that anti-Semitism is on the rise. You remember that there is always a press conference on the eve of Yom HaShoah, on the morning of Yom HaShoah, announcing dramatically that anti-Semitism is on the rise, even when it goes down. Even when it goes down, because you cannot announce on a day like Yom HaShoah that anti-Semitism is going down, which is absurd. We have to be ready. We have to be ready in terms of as a collective way of perception. We have to be ready as researchers, of course. We have to be ready to understand a phenomenon which is made of ups and downs. Even if the down takes time in order to appear, and even if the model is going to change, which is something, which is of course something. Our reality is not ready to be no more ready to conform itself to the model, which is something different. I'd like just to add a sentence concerning the future of Jewish communities in the diaspora for the years to come, for 10 or 20 years to come. This means that anti-Semitism is on the rise, basically, with periods of decline, of course, but anti-Semitism is on the rise. You have sectors in the populations which are basically hostile to the Jews. You have the extreme right, and the extreme right is still hostile to the Jews. Apart from here and there, you have some changes. According to me, there are temporary changes. Basically, the extreme right exists, and in their Weltanschauung, in their conception of the word, the Jews are something bad. You have the extreme left, and the extreme left is not violent concerning the Jews, but they're not physically violent, but they are, of course, violent in terms of polemics, in anti-Zionism, which is an extreme, absurd anti-Zionism, as we all know. And you have the Muslim minorities, which are not small minorities, as we know. They are already important minorities. All of those three sectors, I mean, the extreme right, the extreme left, and the Muslims represent something important. If you aggregate those three sectors, you have in every society a potential. It doesn't mean that the potential is always expressed, of course. You have a potential of hatred concerning the Jews. Thank you.
Liebe Frieda Kiet, Dr. Smith, Professor Maurice Romani, Ambassador Tzvi Mazel, Dr. Rosen. That's it. I'll give on Rabbi Steinitz one more and we close the list. Good, okay, we do it in rounds of Moshe Dan. That's it. 9 questions as usual. First round, Easy Liblov, Frida Kitt, Sarah Schmidt. Easy?
Thank you very much. It was fascinating listening to you. On the other hand, if I may with respect suggest, you have created a mystery where I don't think there's any mystery. The question of the origins of this is really as clear-cut as we've ever seen in any period since the Nazi period. And I would submit the following. We are facing a situation today which is quite different, and it started from the Six-Day War. It started from there, with the ups and downs, with a change in the alignment of Jews with liberalism and with the left. The combination of the Muslim world and the left has created a completely new phenomenon, which means that anti-Semitism has become truly a factor in which isolation is not hysteria, but is real. Because never have we been as isolated as we are today. We are isolated today because we find ourselves in a situation where, unlike in the 1930s, where, as you rightly say, we had the left, the communists and the others fighting fascism and fighting anti-Semitism and going through this phenomenon, we have not only got the far left, but we even have the liberals and the moderate left neutralised and quiet, and we're isolated. And this, I would submit, with the overall element of religious anti-Semitism from Islam and the third world hatred of the Jew in the context of anti-colonialism, etc., it's no mystery. And it's something far more fundamental than anything else we've met since the period of Nazism.
Frida?
In the beginning, when you were discussing the first wave, you mentioned that there was some sort of research or investigation done as to was there an organization behind it? Was there a guiding hand, a Yad Mechavenet? And no, in fact, it was decided that this was hooliganism and copycatism. And the question is, that surely is not true any longer. Surely now, at this stage, we must assume and understand that there is some kind of, I don't want to use the word plot or underground or underhand scheming, but it seems, one does get the impression that there is some kind of worldwide, I hate these expressions, worldwide conspiracy that is in some way guiding what is happening now.
Sarah?
2 questions. You related very briefly, if at all, to anti-Semitism in the United States. Repeated polls of the American Jewish Committee and others show that a vast majority, 80+% of American Jews, fear anti-Semitism, and that it's a consistent concern. Can you comment on that? The other is, to what degree is this last wave facilitating increased aliyah of French Jews to Israel?
During your presentation, you said something about how there's really...
Sorry. Okay, we have three questions. After the round of 3 questions, we come to the next round with the people who have registered. Very confusion between
is anti-Semitism a mystery? No. Is anti-Jewish violence a mystery? No. When I spoke of a mystery, it was concerning the fact that it goes ups and down, it works with ups and down, and please do explain me why here there is an up and why here there is a down. About this, meaning about the internal rhythm of expression, we don't have a total solution. There are attempts to find solutions. There are attempts to find correlation, for instance, with the economic activity. There are attempts to find correlation with other social phenomena or other racist phenomena. There may be a field of research, but we don't have a total a totally satisfying explanation concerning when it starts and when it goes down. Now, what you said about 67. Remember, the wave which came after 73 was a classical extreme rightist wave. Nothing to do with the left, nothing to do, it was neo-Nazis, and it was in fact the beginning of the resurgence of the extreme right in Europe, which attacked Jews. In those days they used swastika, of course, they used words, and just a word about that. Those were little groups who attacked the Jews and who used symbols which were supposed, or names or signatures which were supposed to be frightening symbols. What were the days of division Hermann Göring, division Adolf Hitler, brigade, I don't know. It was a pure, typical extreme rightist attack. Of course, as I said, not organized, not crystallized, but spontaneous. Those were groups of, I'm speaking of the 70s, the end of the 70s. It's true also for here. It's true also for here. Those were groups that, when they were caught by the police and brought to trial, you see three young boys. One was weeping and saying, I'm not responsible, but the leader of the group was clearly ideologically a neo-Nazi. Ideologically, not organizationally. So you have to look at the fact that we had both resurgence of the classical Nazi anti-Semitism, which is still existing, and which, I remember what I said, 1/3 of the attack here are attacks by the extreme right. And we have, all along that way, the beginning of an alliance, and I agree with you, what you said about the extreme left and the Muslim population, and it goes along. It's not the end of that and the beginning of that. It's that plus that. We have the opportunity of having that and that. We have both of them. It's not the end of one and the beginning of a second one. And a last word about isolation. We were not isolated here. We were not isolated in the former one. Here you have wonderful demonstration. You have 1990 in Paris, in May 1990, a dramatic, huge demonstration of hundreds of thousands of people after the desecration of the Jewish cemetery in Carpentras. And you have in Berlin in November 92, a huge demonstration protesting against the attacks against but also again
That's the point I'm making, though, that we are facing now a totally different situation, where it's much more clear-cut.
Yes, no, but the beginning, I agree. Here we are isolated. We were not here. We were not here. So the beginning of that, we cannot build a system, a simple system based, a two-phase system, saying before it was like that, and now it's like that and like that. As I said, the ways are continuing. The extreme right is still existing. It still has its future, and it will appear. It will act against the Jews in one way or in another. Sometimes in a moderate way, sometimes in an extreme way. So we'll have to confront all of them, and not one. The question of the plot and underground. I know plots exist and underground activities exist, but they don't explain everything. They don't. And here, for instance, if you take the huge majority of the cases here, for instance, of violence against the Jews, it is exactly according to the former pattern. A little group with a leader, an improvised leader who decides, let's go and attack. And then he takes 3 or 4 or 5 friends and they go and attack. There is no organization. It doesn't mean it's not important. You understand? It's a sort of wave, a sociologic wave of attacks against the Jews. There may be a plot concerning, let us say, propaganda. There may be, if not a plot, but there may be consultations concerning propaganda or concerning boycott of Israel or things like that. Maybe consultation. But that violence is the true, genuine expression of hatred against the Jews, and the expression is the organization of little squads. So some remarks have been made of the. You have some periods, for instance, where if there is a lot of activity in Israel, for instance, during the Operation Rampart, you know, remember in 2002. So you have, it doesn't mean it was organized. It means that they are looking at the TV and see there is war in Jenin or war in the occupied territory, and so immediately they organize by themselves. It's very easy to take some friends and they go on to attack. The American Jewish Committee. The American Jewish Committee develops a method of proving that there is no anti-Semitism in the United States by using surveys and asking specific questions during the surveys. And because the American Jewish Committee has discovered that there are two categories of questions that you ask in a survey when you ask the general population. If you ask questions of social anti-Semitism, it goes down. Meaning, are you ready that your neighbor should be a Jew, for instance? Are you ready to work with a Jew the general tendency in all the world is to decline. But if you ask a question about stereotypes concerning the Jews, are the Jews too powerful? Are the Jews a collectivity which is much more active for its own interest than for the general interest? You have very bad results. And so the American Jewish Committee has found the way of proving that anti-Semitism is declining. You only ask questions of the first category. And
Except
there was
the numbers have gone way up. They're 80-something% that American Jews feel.
No. That's the American Jews feeling. That's the other thing, because there is a discrepancy between what the American Jews are feeling. It doesn't mean American Jews somewhere may think there is a lot of anti-Semitism. You also have to check if it is true or not. It doesn't mean that it's true. You understand? It is important to understand the internal feeling of a Jewish community, but it doesn't mean that it is true. You have also to check. You understand what is happening by the Goyim, not only to us the Jews. And when the American Jewish Committee asks the Goyim, if I may say, they always ask them those category of questions which show a decline. There was a battle about that question between the ADL and the American Jewish Committee in the beginning of the 90s. Some of you may remember that. There was a battle, because the American Jewish Committee came with those questions which bring always to a decline in anti-Semitism. And the ADL said, those are not the questions you should ask. And the ADL went out in 92 with a survey which brought to completely adverse conclusions. By asking about stereotypes, as I said, do you think the Jews are too powerful? Do you think the Jews are too rich? Do you think the Jews are there is too much Jewish solidarity in the society? Do you think the Jews are a closed group? You understand? And here the answers were very, let us say, highly negative concerning the Jew. You had a high level of anti-Semitic stereotypes concerning those questions.
Second round, Professor Maurice Romani, MS Tzvi Mazel, Professor Louis Rosen. Maurice?
Yes, I like very much your framework, and although I saw it over the 19th and 20th century, even 18th century in Arab, Middle East, and North African, that it's really ups and downs, and it's true, it's not really organized, but it has that attitude. But what concerns me is your description that it's really expressing in Europe the social discontent by these Muslims, and I'm wondering if you can make like a parallel that used to be in the United States, I don't know to what extent it is today, with the black communities, that Jews are all too powerful, they are in control of housing and rental and whatnot and so forth. And this is, and how can you dissociate the variables between religious and social? And even if it was spontaneous, to what extent, say, the organized religion, like the Muslim religion in Germany or in other parts, like in France, can have an impact on this trend that, even if it's ups and downs?
In fact of money, you stole my question.
Steal it.
I'll add something.
That's all the answer.
You connected anti-Semitism of young Muslims, always young Muslims, to a conflict, our conflict, or to social disparity. But what about connecting it to Islam per se? Hatred of the Jews is embedded in Islam.
Yes.
We know. Now, there is another factor which is very, very important, is being neglected. Organization of Muslims, Arabs, in America and in Europe are now controlled by Muslim Brothers. We know it very well. All the most important organization in France, in Germany, in America, here, they are not only monitored, but they are controlled by the Muslim Brothers. And you know, anti-Semitism is embedded also in Hassan al-Banna and Said al-Qutb, and has become the most potent theory in Islam of today, the hate of the Jews. Islam hate, at the beginning there was hatred in Islam. Now it has become anti-Semitism. There is a change, because Jews were considered enemies of Muhammad, okay, but now they are evil. They have to be hated and they have to be aggressed. So there is a new force that joined the left, as we know. It's a new story, completely new story.
Louis?
Two questions. This wave has persisted now longer than any of the previous waves. During the last 10 years, the internet and social networking have become ubiquitous throughout the world. Is there any evidence that these two processes have contributed to the persistence of this wave? The second question concerns the effect of economic circumstances. Certainly the second wave from 74 to 82 coincided with sharp jump in oil prices worldwide, unemployment and inflation simultaneously, and only in the early 80s did things start to improve. Certainly since 2008, we have a real significant rise in unemployment throughout the West. What do you think this contributes?
Yes, about the United States. In all the other waves, the United States are exactly like Europe. It goes up, it goes up, it goes down, it goes down. In this wave, the United States were different because of 9/11, because of other factors. It doesn't mean that there were zero violence in the United States, but you don't see in the United States what you see in the data of Great Britain or in the data of France or Britain. So in that way, it is different. And that because of, first, the American commitment in the fight against, or so-called commitment, it's not our subject, in the fight against terror, for instance, and also the internal composition of the American society. What you said about the black community is certainly true. It's a kind of antagonism which developed in the 60s and the 70s based on economy and society. It is true, and we know that in anti-Semitism there is an important factor, which is social and economic factor, and it plays an important role. It played a role in the relations between the black and the Jewish communities in the United States. Very, very clear. It's not the only factor, of course. We're not looking for one explanatory factor, of course, but it is a very important factor. It may be also a factor in that hostility of the immigrant communities against the Jews. It is in Europe. Of course, you are right concerning Islam and the growing influence of radical Islam concerning the Jews. I accept what you said. But in one of the serious research which has been made in France, about Vieviorka, a Jewish sociologist, and he used a complete Vieviorka. I forgot his first name. forgot his first name. No, Taguieff works alone. Pieviorka is a sociologist. He had 8 persons which were paid by a foundation, and he sent them in every part of France to sit and speak weeks and weeks with those young Muslims. And he came back, everyone made a report, and he made a sort of he wrote a general conclusion, a general synthesis of all the reports. And he said, the influence of Islam, radical Islam, is limited. That's what he said. The sectors which are influenced by radical Islam are totally influenced by radical Islam. They are totally anti-Jewish. But what was the most surprising for him, for certain of the report, was the fact that some were not radical in terms of Islam. Some were light, and then they hated the Jews. Some were, even he said...
They gave the reason?
The reasons are social reasons. But there are no total reasons, not totally acceptable reasons. It's more a book of hypotheses. No, the report is a report, but concerning the explanation. And so, as far as I remember, the report said that some of the young Muslims were people who were very far from religion. Of course, they respected, but not Islam. You understand? They were far from religion. Some of them were even wanted to get integrated in French society. Some of them were even students, for instance, or they wanted to have a job and to get integrated in society. And when you ask them about the Jews, you heard some horrible and violent, vehement and violent responses. So I may say you are right, but it is not the only factor. It is not the only factor. It's an important factor. It's not the only. And the third question, the internet, you may be right. You may be right. It may be a factor of. It may be a factor. Is that the explanation of the fact that the wave is longer than the former one? We don't know. It's possible. It's possible. The economic circumstances. That's a fundamental question. In certain waves, you have a clear correlation, and you mentioned, very rightly, after the 73-74, the first oil crisis, and the second oil crisis in 80-82, the second oil crisis, and this is clear, there is a rise in anti-Semitic violence. There is also a rise in racist violence in general in European societies. Here you may say correlation is perfect. But if you look at other events, you don't, for instance, remember the first crisis, the first wave in 59, 60. No correlation. No correlation. It happens. And here, if you take here, I'm not sure there is a correlation. You understand? So I may say, and you will certainly agree with me, it's a partial correlation. It's a partial correlation. It is not the ultimate explanatory system.
Last round, Ghana give on, by Stanley Steinhardt and Moshe Dam.
I want to thank you very much for your very informative lecture. The thunder was stolen from me as well in terms of the Muslims. But I wonder, with the cultural infiltration of Islam into the United States, that's slow, not as obvious as the open military war, but the cultural war, as I call it, expressed very much by, for example, the Ground Zero mosque now, and the one that was just discovered in Pennsylvania. Americans are beginning to understand a little bit more about the what Islam stands for, and how, and the final effort for a caliphate, for example, etc. Do you think that this in any way would impact the understanding for Jews? Perhaps with all the Muslim attacks worldwide, would you think that this might impact upon the anti-Semitism?
By Stanley Steinhardt.
Dr. Epstein, I'm wondering, are you personally surprised today's Muslim anti-Semitism? I'm not asking for justification. I just want to know, are you surprised that it's come today? And if not, then perhaps we ought to move to the next step in how to combat what's sure to come.
Moshe?
I want to challenge you because I don't agree with the methods you are trying to show us about anti-Semitism and its strengths. You work with statistics and you work with who perform the attacks. I think it's a superficial way. I think one should use the way Helen Fine, the sociologist, tried to work with the problem. She says there is a latent anti-Semitism all over the world at any time. The question is who is igniting this latent anti-Semitism? And in my opinion, there's no doubt it's ideological and political movement who tried to use Jew hate as a vehicle in order to foster their, encourage people to go this way. The last thing is that this ideological movements have people who are working behind in secret. And in my opinion, the most important thing is to find these secret elements and these propagandists who are igniting anti-Semitism.
That was an interruption, Moshe.
Richard.
Richard.
Thank you. A couple of things that, one thing that bothered me mainly, and then two questions. One is that it seems that there's a lot of collection of data, but very little analysis, and that bothers me. And just a personal example of this, I asked the ADL if they had any, if they did any investigation, any analysis of who is behind, who is proposed, who the behind the demonstrations against Israel, and who these demonstrations are composite. And they had absolutely, in Europe, and they had absolutely no answer. And this, I think, is a problem that should be addressed. That there is a serious, from what you've said, serious problem of analysis. My questions relate to two things you left out. One is the effects of Christians in this whole problem. World Council of Churches, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the European Union supporting anti-Israel NGOs, a whole wave of Christian anti-Israel as anti-Semitism. And the last question is if there's any correlation. I'm interested in the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. I've written about it and just published a piece on that, on the subject, an American Thinker. It seems to me that what's happened in the last decade is a phenomenal rise in the organizational structure within the radical Muslim communities, not communities, sorry, radical Muslim institutions and leadership. And they have, I like your comments if you have any on those questions. Thank you.
Cultural War. First, we have to make a distinction between radical Islam may lead to terror and to terrorism. We are speaking here of another kind of violence, which is not terrorism. This is a sort of mass sociological violence. Not a little group preparing a huge bombing, but a lot of little squads organizing themselves in order tonight to attack a Jewish target. It's another kind of violence. Radical Islam may lead to that kind of terror. It may also lead to that kind of incidents, but as I said, there are other factors which bring them, and other kind of, let us say, of groups and of sectors of the Muslim community who are, for instance, young people with no ideology. They only know more or less that they are Muslims, and the Muslims are wonderful, and the Jews are not good. That's all. And
what about incitement?
Incitement is not necessarily. No.
Of the Muslim clergy.
It exists.
Television,
it exists. No, television is not. If you take the television of Germany, it's not a radical Islamic television.
Arab TV stations.
TV stations, okay.
Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya.
Tzvi, remember what I told you. What you said is true for a sector. There is another sector which is much more integrated in France. What I said about which doesn't understand Arab, so they are not really, and they are in a way of getting integrated in French society, and they are anti-Jewish. And when you have a friend who gives you at the school or at the university, let's go and act, and they say let's go and act, it means that he goes. And he speaks French wonderfully. His culture is already almost a totally French culture. It is true that he may have a cousin which is a radical Islamic. There is no clear separation between those sectors. But there is also a sector, let us say, which is a secular sector. Let's call them a secular integrated sector which hates Jews. Now, will it be good for the understanding of the Jews? And that's a classical Jewish question, which Achadam wrote an article about that, saying that Tzarat Rabim is Chatzi Nechama. Okay, we said that also in the 30s. We used to say that in the 30s, saying that since Hitler has other enemies also than the Jews, people will understand because there will be a lot of enemies of Hitler and so on. At the end, the Jews are alone. According to Jewish history and according to Jewish historical experience, the Jews are alone. So I would prefer to have a lot of other people in the same. But at the end, there is always a day, or there is always an angle where we're differentiated from the other. Our fate is different from the fate of others. Are you surprised? No, I'm not surprised. Of course I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised by anti-Semitism in general. I'm not surprised by Muslim anti-Semitism. But we have to go further. If we want to make some research, we have to understand why it happens here, and why it happens then, and why it happens now. You understand? Research always has to go deeper and deeper. And we have to understand the way anti-Semitism behaves. And it's not so easy to understand it. We have a lot of material which are... so, let us differentiate. Let us separate between the question. I agree with the question. I'm not surprised by any kind of anti-Semitism. And not for theological reason, not for theological reason, but for historical reason. Historical experience reasons, the history of the Jewish people, and the history of anti-Semitism. Just a few words about latent anti-Semitism, secret elements. Anti-Semitism is a deep social, historical phenomenon. So don't look for the secret cell which is animating it in order to destroy it, and then the anti-Semitism will disappear. Anti-Semitism exists because it's a historical confrontation, as it was explained by the fathers of Zionism. It was wonderfully explained by generations and generations. It's a deep historical, sociological phenomenon. And it results from the fact that you have Jewish minorities confronted to non-Jewish majorities, and it may create situations of moderation, of good relation. It may also create situations of animosity, and it may create also situations of hostility and of violent hostility. So it's a deep social phenomenon. Don't look for the secret cell animating anti-Semitism. Don't look for that. And now the last question, Moshe. Very little analysis. Yes, you're right. All right, for different reasons. In the academic world, you have a conception which is a literary conception of anti-Semitism. What is a literary conception of anti-Semitism? To take articles or to take books written by anti-Semites and to analyze the book. It doesn't help, it doesn't give anything, it doesn't permit, it's completely useless. You know that this is a dominating trend. The institutions who are dedicated to the study of anti-Semitism. For instance, in Israel you have two. You have one in Jerusalem, one in Tel Aviv. And I know that because I was in one of those two, and I know very well the second one. Do not understand anything in sociological analysis. Anything. I mean, nothing. Okay. It is true also for other countries. The real analysis which we should like to see, it's from time to time you have something for. It's not zero, but from time to time you have something. But it is not what we should have. So, certainly I agree. I agree with you. There are terms, Manfred knows that we speak about that. There is a sort of there is something which is difficult to understand. Christian churches, you know, in their majority, churches have accepted modernity, meaning they are respecting the others, they are respecting the Jews, they are respecting what Islam has not done. Christianity has done something which Islam has not done. That's very clear. There are still certain sectors in Christianity which are quite hardline and hardcore sectors, even concerning the Jews. And you have publications. They are not the official publications of the churches, but you still have hostility concerning the Jews for theological reason. For it exists. It certainly exists. What you said about the Muslims, it's what I said, answering to Tzvi. I agree to what you said. It's a real change in the way Islam is looking at the Jews, and it's more than hostility. It's hatred, pure hatred, pure genocidal hatred. I do agree with that. It's true. But in the Muslim communities in Europe, you have sectors, different sectors, which are not influenced by radical Islam and who hate the Jews too. For which the way of thinking is completely different. They don't hate the Jews because of what is written in the Quran or things like that. They have other, much more modern, let us say, or much more adapted to modern society ways of hating the Jews. You have also those who do not hate the Jews. Of course, if you want to present the totality of the attitudes, you have also sectors who are protected, let us say, for the time being against Jew hatred.
Thank you very, very much. We hope to see you again, once with a more pleasant message. The next way. And I hope to see you all here on the 2nd of November for the movie on Bosnia.